Thank you, Nicole, for joining me this evening. I'm really excited to interview you and know more about your consulting firm. So I'll start there. Tell me about yourself and about your business as much as you'd like to share.
All right. So I am Nicole Martin, and I am the founding consultant of We the Village Education Consulting. I am from Oakland, born and raised. I attended all Oakland public schools, and I grew up, in the 90s mostly. I came of age during the 90s, and in my neighborhood, specifically in the West Oakland area, it was, during the height of the crack cocaine era. And things were really hectic, I would say, very chaotic in the community, in my family, in my home. But school was always something that I excelled at, and it was always a place where I was affirmed and, really, knew that I had a chance to do something more and better with my life than what I was seeing and what I was experiencing around me. And so I just think my mom and my family always saw potential in me, because as long as I can remember, as far back as I can remember, people have always told me how smart I was. And, in school, I guess that was just reinforced by getting good grades all the time. And my mom was very clear, you're going to go to college, you're going to get good grades, you can get scholarships. And she would tell me, like, Mama ain't got no money, so you got to get scholarships, but you got to get good grades, because you're smart and you're going to go to college and, make something in your life, be better than me, that whole spiel. But it was a real thing, and she really emphasized that, and she didn't waver on that. I don't care what was going on. She always had high expectations for us. She never, ever lowered her expectations of me and my sisters, and I'm the oldest of three girls. And my mom raised a lot of kids, we're her biological kids, but she's raised so many kids,
Yeah,
village. Yeah, so she really had high expectations for us in that village, and that's part of why I even came up with that title. I had a village. As dysfunctional as my family was, they were very supportive of me. They encouraged me. They always told me again how smart I was. They would brag to their friends about how smart I was when I was a little girl. And so there was never a question or a doubt that I wouldn't go to college and that I wouldn't do well in life. I never, ever doubted that, ever. It was just about getting there. And so I did that. I went to high school and I went to McClymonds, and, McClymonds always gets a bad rap, but that school, if you're a student who goes there and really wants to do well and go to college, and if you're focused and you're a leader, you can do very well there. And so I went to McClymonds and came out number 3 in my class, and
that's awesome.
Had 11 scholarships when I graduated. To whatever schools. I was accepted to all the colleges that I applied to. Actually, I wasn't accepted to the college I attended initially. I don't always tell people this because, once you get in, you forget about the fact that you have to appeal,
Yeah.
But Berkeley was my number 1 choice, and it was the one school I didn't get into. I applied to 8 schools, and so I appealed and I got in. And so, the rest is history. That's where I went to school. But I think that's where the shift came in, and I think that's where probably We the Village was born. I just didn't know at the time that's what was happening.
Right.
I went to Cal, and it's next door. It's Berkeley. I'm from Oakland. It's 10 minutes away from home. You can even see campus from my house. But it's a whole other world when you get up there, and in the classroom, I literally had classes where I may have been one of 2 other Black students, and there are 200 people in the class or 150 people in the lecture hall. And not only can I count the number of Black students, I can count the number of brown students in the class too. That was a change. That was a big shift, because it's Oakland and Berkeley. I go to Berkeley all the time. I'm going to Fast Slice. That's right across the street from campus. I see Black people, but that's all aside. These are not people and students at the school. The campus is different.
Yeah.
So when you're in those classes, and you can relate, I'm sure you went to Mill.
Easily.
Exactly what I'm talking about. You guys are in your own little enclave in the middle of the hood.
Yep.
And so it's kind of a facade, but thank God I am from Oakland, and I did have my friends and family close, because had I not had that, I don't know how I would have done in that setting, because I had to really learn to just be me
Yeah.
And it was intimidating because these students were coming from all over the world. They're really smart. I'm coming from little old Mac, and I mean, I got good grades, but my A's probably weren't really A's at these other schools. That some of these, they were coming from college prep schools and boarding schools in different countries. And this is, I mean, not like that, but this is your competition. These are your competition. This is who you are in the world up against, right?
Yeah.
So, I think what ended up happening for me was majoring in African American studies. And initially it wasn't my major. I just started taking those classes for certain requirements. And once I started taking those classes, I realized how well, I was doing and how much I enjoyed those classes and reading the material. And I was excited, and I actually did better on my assignments. And so I was pre-law at the time, and I knew, to go to law school, I should try to major in something like poli-sci, or rhetoric, or English, or legal studies, something in the legal field,
right.
Something related directly. And so none of those majors were quite working for me.
Mm-hmm. They didn't resonate.
They didn't resonate.
Yeah.
They were not resonating. So I ended up trying to do an interdisciplinary major.
Okay.
Interest in American Studies. It was an interdisciplinary major, and I did an emphasis on race, public policy, and the law. And I had to do a thesis for this major originally, and my minor ended up being African American Studies, or at the time, so I was majoring in this interdisciplinary thing, focusing on race, public policy, and law, because I want to go to law school. Okay. But I was taking all my classes in the African American Studies department, because with the interdisciplinary major, you create your own program. So other than the requirements, which were like 4 classes, you decide which classes fit that particular, focus.
Right.
So everything about race and policy and law that I could take, I took in African American Studies or ethnic studies. Very much so, I ended up having enough to double major, and I didn't realize that.
What a blessing.
Right?
Yes.
So I was kind of on the track to do that, and I was writing my thesis for my major on, it was about the impact of like crack cocaine, but I was looking at the anti-drug abuse laws actually, and how they were disproportionately impacting African American men. And so all that to say, it really kind of took me down this rabbit hole of studying the impact of crack cocaine and understanding like mass incarceration and all of that. And this is like back in 2002, 2003 that I'm really getting into this.
Right.
And so that kind of really did something to me. And it took me a while to I ended up staying in school a little longer because I couldn't finish my thesis. It was just too much. And I couldn't narrow it down, and it was I was over it. So I ended up dropping American Studies and coming out with a degree in African American Studies, which is what I should have majored in.
Yeah, it sounds like everything worked out in the end. It was full circle.
It was a full circle, and sometimes when you don't listen to what you already know, you got to take the scenic route. So I took the scenic route, but I did. Had I not done that, I probably wouldn't have started really learning about crack, right, and the impact of like crack on Black families and all the stuff that now I'm very much into, right? Mm-hmm. So that all led me to major in African American Studies, and everybody kept saying, well, are you still going to go to law school? What you going to do with a degree in African American Studies? All you can do with that is teach. You're not going to make any money. Mm-hmm. And I bought into that. I was like, I don't want to be poor. I don't want to teach. I'm going to go to law school.
I didn't go to college to be poor.
But that's what everyone else was saying. So I graduated, I came out of school, and I was still working in the legal field, like doing subpoena work and all this stuff, still planning to go to law school. But I told myself I was going to take time off. I was going to study for the LSAT. I was going to apply to law school in 2 years. And what ended up happening is one of the new younger teachers at my old high school, I would always go up there and visit. She just, they would always ask me to talk to the students and tell them about college and what it's like, how to prepare. And so one time she was like, you should teach. And I was like, teachers don't make no money. I gave her the whole spiel,
No.
I don't want to be broke. Teachers don't make no money. And I'm too young. I don't want to deal with these kids. And honestly, that was a fear too. I was still hanging out in West Oakland and, doing a lot of stuff. So I was like, I can't be a teacher at Mac and hanging out with you and doing what I'm doing. Like, I can't do that, right? So anyway, I kind of ran from it, but then it really started to settle with me because other people started saying, you should really think about it, you should consider it, you'll be great at it. And with me majoring in African American studies, I was thinking like, damn, there is a lot that young people don't know that they should know.
Right.
And so I decided to do it. I still had a 2-year plan to get my credential and go to law school. And I started teaching, and for whatever reason, I got my degree in English instead of history. I mean, my credential. I started working on a credential in English. And I should have done history, but I listened to other people. I listened to other people because they told me, oh, you'll have more options if you get a credential in English. And I'm a good writer and I like English. So I said, okay, yeah, I'll do that. So I was teaching English and it was cool. And I realized that I was a good teacher. I naturally was able to build good relationships with young people. And that worked. That went a long ways because I had absolutely no training, because this is going to come full circle back to why I'm We the Village, right? Education consulting. I had no training. I got thrown in there. I was 24 years old. All I had was that I was from Oakland like these kids. And I ended up teaching at Madison Middle School in East Oakland in Sabrani Park. Mm-hmm. And most of my students were actually Latinx, probably like 60%, and the other 40% African American or something like that. But I fell in love with teaching. I absolutely fell in love with teaching.
That's amazing.
And it was. And even still, after my first year, I was like, oh, I'm still going to law school though. But I knew I was a good teacher. And then the second year I taught at McClimon's, I got to go back to my high school. I was teaching English. That's what they hired me to teach, 9th grade. And then a teacher quit in the middle of the year because he could not handle the student. That happens often in public
all
schools,
the time,
right? Especially our babies. Mm-hmm. So he quit in the middle of the year, whatever. And they came to me and they were like, oh, you majored in African American studies, because he had 2 African American study periods. Okay. And I had a free period during the period that he had that class.
Of course.
So I picked up the class. Mm-hmm. And if I thought I enjoyed teaching before that,
you fell in love?
It was like, it was really life-changing. It literally changed my life. I knew when I started teaching African American studies that was what I was supposed to do. I knew I was a much better teacher than I was teaching English. And it was clear I had the same students. You know, all my students at MAC predominantly Black. I had the same students in English that I had in 6th period for history, you know, because I was like their elective. Right. And in English, they were okay. I would get them to do stuff because they respect me. We had a good relationship. But what they were like in the history class was totally different. And I realized that they were more engaged because I was more passionate. I was more excited. I was more engaged. I was spending all my time planning my African American study lesson. It was only one class. And I put so much time into those lessons because I wanted to teach them everything about like who we were. And there was so much history just about being from West Oakland that we didn't know. I didn't learn it until I went to college. So I know these kids didn't know it about the Panthers and, you know, Marcus Garvey, Universal Negro Improvement Association located in Lower Bottom, like all this stuff. The Portermen, on the railroads, how Black families even came to the community. So I had them do these projects, and I still have some of those kids' projects.
That's awesome.
2007, 2008. Because they did an awesome job. The projects were like on the Reconstruction era. But anyway, so I knew that's what I was supposed to do. And literally my boss tried to get me to teach geography the next year. She was like, well, you weren't really supposed to teach African American history. And, you know, there was already a teacher who normally taught that. And if anybody was going to teach it, she was going to teach it. So it was this whole thing. And I was like, well, if I got to teach geography and English, I'm not teaching it.
Yeah. I love that you were firm. You're very passionate about what you love and what you want to teach, but you also had very strong boundaries.
It was something because I had fell in love with it, and I didn't teach. I left. I put in and I left. And anyhow, that started me. When I was at McClimon's, I got to wear a lot of different hats, and one of the things I got to do was be an advisor. And in advisory, you did a lot of the stuff around the A through G requirements and college readiness. And I really kind of fell in love with that too. And I also was really good at like, you know, advising young people. So I was like, I don't even got to teach no more. If I can't teach African American history and nobody's offering, you know, that as a regular thing to teach, then I don't want to teach. I was like, I'm not going to sell myself short. And that's literally what I said. I was like, I'm a much better teacher when I'm doing African American studies. So I started doing counseling and advising, got into the nonprofit world, and I ended up going back to school and getting my master's in ethnic studies. Mm-hmm. And that really started the trajectory of me knowing that as an educator, it was important for me to really be working with African American families and children and people. Even if I worked with other people, it was important that the focus of my work was with my people. And I think going to school and getting my master's and then coming out and getting the opportunity to work with the Freedom School program, Leadership Excellence in Lincoln, and now, Leadership Excellence in Flourish Agenda, that changed everything too, with, being able to do that. And so I think, and simultaneously, while I was coordinating and doing Freedom School and West Oakland Initiative and working with African American children, around literacy and all that stuff, I was teaching at Laney African American Studies. And I think being able to do that, it gave me a really unique insight into education for African American people, because literally I was working with people as young as 5 all the way to 60, 70 years old at one time. And I don't think anybody has ever at one time worked with a full spectrum of people in a way where you're educating all these different age groups, right? And so that was really unique. And I think that, along with all the different work I started doing after I left the classroom, all the advising for the nonprofits and college readiness, career readiness, coordinating after school programs, I think all that stuff really kind of led me to where I am today. I just feel like I have this culmination of experiences around working with people of color and Black folks specifically. And I've never really had the opportunity to create my own vision around how to do that work. I've always, been working with other people and doing that work for them. So that kind of ties into,
Yeah, you brought up, a lot about you and your history and, your business. And I feel like naturally you brought up what inspired you. But I want to know more about what services do you offer? Are you offering your services to community-based organizations like schools, or is it you're partnering with other programs or individuals? What does that look like?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So for the most part, I'm really interested in working and partnering with organizations, nonprofit, community-based organizations in different institutions, be it schools or, different programs or whatnot, that service African American children and families. Okay. So, any entity, institution that, primarily that's a big segment of their work, or that's a primary segment of their demographic, those are the kind of, partners I'm looking to work with. Although I'm open to working with any institution or organization that work with people of color, young people, because I do have that experience and background. But specifically, We the Village Education Consultant is specializing in working with African American children and families, and really just trying to create more meaningful opportunities around education and community engagement for our people. I've been fortunate to do that work for the last 8 years. And it really, really does make a difference who and how, we engage Black children and families, right? And that's something that I really want to be able to lean into to do this work.
Since you're talking about, it sounds like you're going into your goals and who you want to work with. So my next question is, what are your short-term and long-term goals for your consulting firm?
So I'm really looking to partner with people who are interested in maybe creating programming that's more culturally, responsive to the population that they serve. I really enjoy kind of going in and looking at what people do already and what kind of programs and services they're offering, and then say, okay, how can we tailor this, or how can we build on this to really meet the needs of your African American, demographic, right? Because some people serve more than African Americans, but I do think that Black folk, we have a unique experience in this country, and because of that, we need a unique way of how you engage us, right? And it can't always just be a one size fit all. We do need people to really get in there and understand who we are, how we move, and the nuances of who we are as a people.
Yes.
I think that's what's really important. People like to box Black people in, and a lot of times that box is not a good box. It's a very negative box, right? And we are very layered and complicated, nuanced people because of our experiences, because of oppression and all the things we've been through, and our, the fact that we have to be so resilient all the time. It's a lot goes into who we are. So
we are not a one size fit all.
You're not a one size fit all. As much as people like to put that on us, we're not. And whenever you go into something thinking that we are that way, you're gonna miss some steps, But at the same time, there are some common experiences, though, that as an educator or a youth worker or, somebody working with the community, there are some common experiences that you can lean into that also can, go a long way with how you get us to respond. But I think that there just are a lot of misunderstandings about how to engage us and what we need, and so that's something that I want to help organizations and educators and youth workers be able to understand, is all those, like I said, complexities of who we are, because that's important.
I agree. So, is there anything that you want to share or add that I have not brought up that's very important to you about either yourself or your business that you'd like viewers to know?
I'm starting out. I think that this business was really inspired by, one, like I said, just my need and desire to really create something of my own with my own vision, and to really, just bring together all these experiences, right? And see what I can come up with and what I can do. But I think, something that I would want people to know is how necessary and important this work is, how important it is to really make sure that the people that are working with our young people that are responsible for educating them, for socializing them, right? That they understand, what it is we're doing and how to do it, and how you don't have to look like, Black folk to successfully engage us, either. And I don't want to make it seem that way, but I do think we should be the primary people educating and engaging our kids. Of course, I think that, but I don't think that it's an exclusively, only African Americans can educate and help and support African American children and families. I don't believe that, but I just think that people need to do their history, learn your history when you work with Black people. I think that's the parting message that I would leave with, is really understand the history and experiences of Black people, because that'll help understand those nuances and complexities of who we are. One thing I'll, just kind of share as an example of this work, and, you're a little privy to this. When we were doing that work with attendance, you can't come at Black parents, even though we know we may have recruited a kid for a program because they're chronically absent, and we know that's a problem.
Yeah.
To address it. Right. But if you come at them like your kid is absent, chronic, that they'll shut you down real quick. It's like, I already know they late, or I already know they absent. You're not telling me anything new, right? And so understanding that just because a Black mom or father responds to you in that way does not mean they don't care about their child's education. Yeah. It doesn't mean that they don't value school, because these are the misconceptions that start as soon as a parent responds to you that way. But what they're not taking into consideration is that parent is probably working 2 or 3 jobs, They got a lot going on that they handling, and you're not really telling them anything that they don't already know.
Yeah.
So how do you reframe that into something where you're offering something to them more positive and beneficial? And so I remember thinking, I can't have a program that just straight up say, your kid's chronically absent, It was more about, okay, what do all parents want for their kids? Most parents want their kids to go to college, and they want them to, be performing at grade level and all those great things. And so it's like, maybe we'll say we're recruiting your kids to be in a program that's geared towards getting them in college.
Right.
And some of those things that we need to do in order to get them in college is focus on attendance. And we need to, make sure that we're more mindful of that. And, just reframing it, because now we're meeting the parents where they are, because the reality is they do want what's best for their kids, and they do want them to be in something that's going to help them get to college if you can offer that. But what they don't want to hear is you talking about those chronic absent days. Like, you don't need to add more to their plate, right? We got a lot going on. And that's not, again, for every Black parent.
Right.
But, oftentimes those are the kind of experiences that, that are being had, that does then paint this picture that, Black parents don't care and they're not invested in their kids' education. And that's why Black children are performing so poorly. So, again, I think just people need to really learn our history, learn about our experiences, before you can really go in and do this work, especially if you're not a person, a Black person.
Yeah.
I think that's what I would part with.
I agree. And I would add to show up with empathy. Like, you can come in and say, like, for your example, your child is chronically absent, and, maybe your life's experiences are not like theirs. So you only think through your own lens, but you don't know what's going on at home, right? And maybe you don't even need to know what's going on at home. When we show up with empathy, we put ourselves in other people's shoes, and we think, okay, how is that going to sound? How's that going to make them feel? Is that going to turn them off forever? So that's what I would add.
And I know I said that was the last thing. Okay.
No, let's go.
I'm going to say, because I also think one thing that I didn't mention in talking about what I do, or, who I want to work with, I do want to work with African-American parents. But I think even partnering with an organization or institution to do work and workshops, specifically like trainings with parents, that's something that I offer, We the Village Education Consulting, because I think that it is important to be able to engage parents in the work that we do with young people. And it takes a certain somebody, again, who understands all those things about parents to really be able to build those relationships, to, get them to show up fully, to have a transformative, experience needed to really support their child in the ways that they, that are going to help them be, more successful. And so I think that's another big part of the work. And I don't want to leave that off, because that's really important. As much as I want to work with institutions and organizations, I would love to work with their parents and staff and train them on how do we best support Black children, right? So that really is the work in a nutshell. It's about me taking all these best practices to work with, teachers, educators, youth workers, parents, anybody who is engaging Black children. That's who I want to work with, and do training work, capacity building, curriculum development. So yeah, that really is it. I think that's it.
So my very last question is, how do our viewers find you?
Yes, so I don't have my website up yet, but I do have an email. I do have my email, and they can reach me at wethevillage.edconsulting@gmail.com. So that's wethevillage.edconsulting@gmail.com.
Perfect. Any last thing you want to add? Anything?
No, just thank you. I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to share what I do. And it's good for me to do this. So no, just thank you.